evening, everyone. Welcome to tonight's My Journey webinar, College Admissions 101 for Seniors, your ultimate college application roadmap. My name is Candace Lytle, and I'm your host for this premier event in our My Journey series. I'm beyond excited to have each of you here, and on behalf of ACT, thank you so much for joining us. I'm so honored to be joined by our incredible expert speaker tonight from Collegewise. But before I turn things over to Kevin, I want to cover some essentials to help you enhance your viewing experience. You're going to see several widgets and tools on your screen. You're in control of these. They're resizable and movable, so you're welcome to move them around to get the most out of your screen space. If you have any questions during the webinar, you can submit them through the Q&A engagement tool, and we'll do our best to answer them throughout the webinar, and we'll also have some time for questions at the end. A copy of the slides is available in the resources tool, as well as some other handy items to accompany this presentation and for your reference long after it's over. The webinar will be recorded and sent to the email address you registered with within 1 to 2 weeks. For the best viewing experience, we encourage using a high speed and stable internet connection and closing any programs or browsers running in the background that could cause issues. If you're struggling with anything, check out the help tool at the bottom of your screen. And finally, if you need a refresher on any of this, there's a helpful webinar viewing tips and reminders slide at the screen below that will remain visible the entire webinar. If you have any issues, click the On24 Help button at the top of the screen. Okay, I'm ready, and I hope you are too. At this time, I'm going to turn it over to our presenters from Collegewise. Thank you.
Belinda, I think you're muted. All right, why don't I just jump in, Belinda, and I'll get it started, and you can run the poll. So thanks to everyone for joining us. I'm certainly hoping that everyone can hear me. I'm seeing live on my mic. But so we're here tonight to talk about College Admissions 101 for seniors, because we're talking about the group of people who are in the throes of the college application process right now. So whether you are in the middle of writing your application essays and filling out the applications and getting all your materials together, or if you're just looking to be getting that started, we're here to be able to help you with those things tonight. So my colleague Belinda, to get us started, is going to run a short poll here just to get a sense of who is joining us. It helps me kind of direct the presentation to the right audience. So if you wouldn't mind participating in this poll, give us a sense of which one of these groups you're representing as you're here tonight. And we'll give you 15 to 30 seconds to complete this, and then we'll forge ahead. We'll look at our results and jump into the presentation. All right, give me about another 10 more seconds here, and then we'll see what we've got. All right, let's see what our survey says here. Oops, sorry, jumped ahead. This is great. Okay, so we've got a good mix here of parents and guardians, students, and we always appreciate the counselors and educators who show up to hear this kind of information from us, and we hope that you'll share it liberally with any of your students that you think might benefit. But with that poll behind us, let's jump into our information now. So first, just a short introduction. So as we mentioned at the beginning, we're from Collegewise. Collegewise is a national college admissions counseling and tutoring company. And we were founded 26 years ago because we believed at the time that the college admissions process in the United States had sort of spun out of control. And we're still seeing that today, over a quarter century later, that there's so much information for families to try to get their arms around, that there's a lot of misinformation, there's a lot of rumor, a lot of myth. And so we find that a lot of the families that we come across are really just trying to figure out, what is the best thing that we should be doing right now to really support our students? And where can they go and get good, accurate, helpful information? And that's really our mission. We really want to be the most trusted source of that kind of information. And so we do that in several ways. The way that we earn our living at Collegewise is people can hire our tutors to help them with standardized tests or with their classes in high school. And then our college counselors, we have over 150 of them on our staff. And so families can hire us to assign them to one of our counselors who will be sort of like a project manager and advisor with them throughout the process. We'll be talking a little bit more about that at the end of this session, but all the information that I'm going to be sharing here with you tonight, it's the same type of information that we share with our students, and much of it we have gleaned from the counselors we have hired who worked as admissions officers at colleges and came to join our company so that they can be college counselors. And we also think of ourselves as teachers because we do these sorts of presentations with partners like ACT, and we're really proud and honored to be able to get in front of virtual audiences and share this kind of information. My name is Kevin McMullin, and I founded Collegewise 26 years ago. At the time, I was living in Southern California, and I founded it out of my apartment, and I had 9 students that first fall, and I drove to students' homes, and we sat at their kitchen tables to complete their college applications. So here we are 26 years later with 150 counselors on our staff, and while we no longer sit at students' kitchens and tables, the overall vibe is very much the same, that each family is assigned to one counselor who shares responsibility with the student for ensuring that everything they need to do to prepare for, plan, apply, and get accepted to college goes smoothly and thoughtfully. So with that, let's jump into our information. Tonight, what I want to cover is give you a little bit of a state of the nation of sort of what's happening in college admissions today as it applies to seniors. I want to go through exactly what colleges are evaluating about you when you apply, and I'll spend the majority of my time in the third part here in the art of application presentation, because really that is the challenge, and it's a wonderful challenge, but that students face now is you've got 3 years of a high school career, presumably you're applying as a senior, 3 years of a high school career, plus a remaining 4th year that you're going to try to give the colleges a snapshot of what you're going to be doing, and you want to present it in the clearest, most compelling way that you can. So I want to talk about some of the tips that we've learned from the former admissions officers that have come to work for us, and then towards the end, we'll take some of your questions and tell you a little bit more about Collegewise. So when we talk about state of the nation with college admissions, most families tell us that they hear a lot of bad news about getting into college today. And this can be different depending on the community you live in. But typically what we hear from families is that they read these stories in the press. They hear people talking about how it's so difficult to get in. We're hearing about all these seemingly perfect students who are being turned away from their dream schools. And so that can be really demoralizing for the highest achieving students that want to go to some of those really selective colleges. And it can be even more demoralizing for the students that aren't at the top of the class, and they might get the message, and this would not be an accurate message, that they're really not going to be eligible for college. So I'm here to start by delivering some good news, that when we look at the overall rate of admissions for colleges in the United States, there are more than 2,500 four-year colleges and universities in the United States. And this large chunk of the pie here, the blue section, those are colleges that are accepting more than half of their applicants. So the colleges where that bad news is true, where the students with the straight A's and the perfect test scores and the seemingly perfect portfolios, there just aren't that many of them applying to college, but a lot of them apply to the same 65 colleges or so that actually are that selective. But the schools where that bad news is true represent only a tiny slice of this pie. So what does this mean for you? Well, first, the good news is that the average acceptance rate for colleges, if you put them all together across the United States, they accept roughly 75% of the applicants. So most of the students who are applying to college get into college. And the bad news is, as I said before, that there's roughly 65 highly selective schools that accept less than 20% of their applicants. So those tend to be the famous prestigious ones. Those are the schools like Harvard and Stanford and Berkeley and University of Michigan. And this is a whole different webinar topic we could do here, but I do think that it's really critical to note that just because a school is very difficult to get into doesn't mean that it's an inherently better school than another college where you might go that might be easier to get into. And one of our mantras at Collegewise that we talk with our students about all the time, and we've seen this play out over 25 years because we try to stay in touch with our students who go on to college so that we can hear about their experiences and then hear what they end up doing after college. We have found that what a student does when they are in college is much, much more important than the relative prestige of the college where they do it. So there is some bad news for that tiny slice of schools, but it is a tiny slice of schools. And so the takeaways here are, don't make admissions assumptions. Assumptions will hurt you in the college admissions process. Assumptions can sound like this. Well, I have a really great GPA, so I'm sure I'm going to get into some of these selective colleges. So I'm going to apply to 10 or 12 of them, and I don't want to apply to any other schools that are less selective. Well, you're assuming that you're going to get into those schools that are admitting only 20 out of every 100 applicants. What can be even more damaging is the students that believe all that bad news and assume, well, I'm not really college material. You know, I've got B's and maybe some C's, or maybe I had one bad semester in high school. You know, I just don't really think I'm going to be qualified to go anywhere. And so what we recommend that every student do is, instead of making assumptions or listening to your friends talk about it or your neighbors talk about it, speak with your school counselor about what schools would be appropriate for you to apply to. Your school counselor, even if you don't see your school counselor on a regular basis, they know what has happened with the students at your high school that have applied as recently as last year's senior class. They know who applied where, they know who got in, and they know who didn't. And they can look at your qualifications and suggest some appropriate schools for you where you have a strong chance of admission that also have whatever it is that you're looking for in a college. But don't make assumptions. Create a balanced college list with schools you'd be excited to attend. A balanced college list means if you've got a dream college, a place that you've always wanted to go, and your school counselor says that's pretty out of reach for you, it's not likely a place that's going to admit you, you could decide to take your shot anyway, just so that you know. But then you want to make sure that you also apply to many other colleges where your chances of admission are stronger. And we always recommend that you find some schools that where you know that you'd be very excited to attend them. They have what you're looking for. And if possible, if you can find some schools which would usually be the public options in your home states, some schools where you would need less financial aid, or maybe even, depending on your situation, no financial aid to be able to attend, those give you some really good options so that no matter which colleges say yes, which say no, you'll have a core group of colleges that are affordable, that have what you're looking for, and are most likely to say yes to you. And then just remember that great educations and experiences happen everywhere. The prestigious colleges don't have the market cornered on great college educations. College is not like riding a roller coaster where you just get in, put your hands up and go for a ride. It's almost like joining a gym. And I've said this to students for 26 years, but you can join the most expensive gym in town. And if you don't ever go to that gym, you're not going to get in shape. Where the person that just has a pair of dumbbells in their garage and works out every day, they're going to get in shape. So that's sort of it's sort of a simplistic comparison there. But wherever you go to college, the benefit that you extract from it will be directly related to the effort that you put into it and how much you maximize the opportunities that are available to you there. And those opportunities exist in many forms at thousands of colleges across the country. So with that, let's jump into what colleges are evaluating. Now, not all colleges evaluate the same things, but I want to start with the parts that just about every college will evaluate about you. And that starts with your biographical information, which is not so much an evaluation, but just things they need to know. What is your name? What is your address? What's your social security number? Where did you go to high school? That's basic factual information. They're going to evaluate your classes and your grades, and they'll get that by a transcript that you will send to them. Or some colleges will have you do what's called self-reporting, where you'll actually list on your own, rather than send a transcript, you'll list the classes that you've taken and the grades that you got in those courses. And then if you're admitted, the college will ask you then to send a transcript to make sure that you were accurate in what you reported. And then the colleges that still require test scores. And there was a big period after COVID where a lot of colleges said, we're going to remove the requirements for students to submit standardized test scores like the ACT and SAT. Now we're seeing some of those test score requirements coming back, and we're seeing many colleges that are using what they call test optional policies, where students who have test scores that they're proud of can submit them, but they don't have to. So this is something you'll want to get from each of the individual individual colleges' websites to make sure that you understand what their requirements are. But if they require test scores, or if they evaluate them on an optional basis and you decide to submit them to the college, then they will also evaluate your test scores. Now, here's where things can get interesting and where we talk about the art of application presentation. There are more than 1,000 colleges in this country that will stop their evaluation of a student right here. The application won't ask you for any other information. Almost all of the schools that stop their evaluation here are in that giant slice of the blue slice of that pie that I showed you. Schools that are accepting more than half of their applicants, and generally those tend to be large state universities. Now, not all large state universities fit that description, but the schools that stop their evaluation here, most of them are large state universities. They're just not the most selective ones. And these tend to be in states where the number of applications and applicants is such that they can set some minimum requirements in terms of GPAs and test scores, and they're not overwhelmed with applications. They're not receiving more applications from qualified applicants than they have spaces to give out. And so if you look at a college application on their website and all they're asking for is this information, that means it really isn't going to be about the art of application presentation. It's just going to be, make sure that you send what they're asking for, make sure you send it by the deadline, and make sure that you're accurate in what you report here. But there's really no skill in doing that. You just need to be careful, and you have to have some attention to detail. But the colleges that will ask for more than this are taking what they call a holistic approach to college admissions. And this is a photo of an actual college admissions office. What this means is, instead of just admitting you based on your grades and maybe your test scores, they're going to absolutely still look at those things. Every college that requires test scores looks at them, and every college is going to ask you for the classes and the grades that you got. But you'll have a group of human beings that are going to discuss your case. And the person who reads your file, if they believe you should be admitted, they will make a case to the admissions committee, and each individual admissions member has their stack of people they believe should be admitted, and they make cases to their colleagues, and then they vote on it. So this is a very human process. It does not mean that it's random. It doesn't mean that it's arbitrary, but it does mean that it's not entirely scientific. And that means there's a lot you can do to influence how your application is perceived. And that's what I want to talk about. So the remaining factors here that they could potentially look at could be your honors and awards. Many applications will have a section where they ask you to list those. And by the way, if you don't have any honors or awards in your high school career, you should know that you're among the majority of college admissions applicants, that most people don't have a long list of honors and awards. And there are plenty of students who might say, I've taken difficult classes, I've gotten mostly A's and B's, I'm really proud of my academic record in high school, I've participated in activities, but I've never really won any honors or awards. That's perfectly okay. But if you've won them, then you've earned them, they want to hear about them. They will ask about your activities, and I'm going to talk about these in more detail in just a minute. What have you done outside of class? This is where these humans who are reading your application get a sense of who this human is who submitted the application. How do you spend your time when you're not in classes at school? Many colleges will also require essays, one or more of them, as part of the application. And as I'll be revealing in just a minute, essays are not a writing test. It's not a way for them to see if you are a good writer, if you can do what your English teachers have taught you. It is a chance for them to learn more about the person who is applying, and I'll be giving you some tips about that. Some schools will also ask for letters of recommendation. They might ask for one from a school counselor. They might ask for one from a teacher. And in some cases, they might even invite one from a personal source that can just be from anyone that you want to. And then finally, a very small smattering of those colleges will also include an interview as part of the application process. They are almost never mandatory because usually these are done by alumni who live in your area. These are graduates of the college, and not everybody has a graduate of the college who lives in your area. So I'll be going through each of these, but at this stage of the game, the tips that I want to share with you are, first, follow directions. Now, This sounds like one of those basic pieces of advice that I can feel the teenagers rolling their eyes right now. And believe me, I'm with you. I would be doing the same thing if I came to a webinar and the advice I'm getting is follow directions. But let me tell you why this is critically important. Many students, when applying to college, will decide, well, they have a better way of doing this. For example, the college asked me to list my activities in this space provided, but I've got too many activities to share, so I'm just going to write see attached resume, and I'm going to send them a resume to put in my file and look at it. But what you just did is you ignored their directions. And I can tell you this, that from working with so many former admissions officers, colleges spend months architecting their applications, getting them the questions they want, how they want to ask for this information, how much space they want to provide. And when you ignore their directions and just do it your own way, it can kind of annoy them a little bit. And you don't want to annoy the people who are reading your application. So you've got to trust the process here. So follow directions doesn't just mean do what you're told. It also means don't decide that you have a better way or that you are a unique case. When in doubt, call the college or contact the college and ask them. There's nothing wrong with doing that. Admissions officers are happy to answer your questions, provided that you've shown that you looked for this information on their website. And I'll give you a separate Collegewise pro tip here. Colleges generally don't want to hear from parents. They want to hear from the students. They will make jokes in the admissions office sometimes if they hear from one parent over and over and over again, but they never hear from the student. So the student needs to be mature and have enough initiative to make those contacts on their own, to ask those questions themselves. The exception to that rule is if it's a call being placed to the financial aid office to talk about financial aid and paying for college. They expect that in more cases than not, parents will make those phone calls. Second, prioritize clarity over quantity. There's an understandable urge for a lot of students to try to share as much information as possible. And so they do things like, well, if I play violin in the orchestra, should I send an audio recording of me playing in the orchestra? Or should I, send copies of the newspaper articles that they wrote about me playing on the softball team? They want to send more information or cram as much information as possible into the application. And our advice to students is always to, while you're following the directions, work within the parameters of the application and decide what are the most important elements of your high school career that you want to share, and make sure that you share those with as much clarity as possible. Be clear, be forceful in a good way, make it easy for them to understand what this activity was. So, for example, I recall a student once that listed on an application that he had won the Cosmos Award his sophomore year of high school. But no one knows what the Cosmos Award is except the people at his high school. So when we reviewed his application, he added just a couple more sentences of detail to say that this was an award given for a high-performing science student. It was given out to 2 students annually, and that the award was decided on by the science faculty at his high school. So that's good information to share. But if you're trying to cram as much information as possible about everything you've done, then you run out of space to be able to do those things. So prioritize the clarity over the quantity. These are human beings reading these applications. I mean, imagine if you met a new person and you said, tell me a little bit about yourself. And they told you 20 things about themselves. You're not going to be able to remember all of those. But if you said, here are 4 or 5 things to know about me that really encapsulate who I am, well, that's really interesting. And you might want to know more. And that's the kind of intrigue you're trying to create here. And then finally, tell the whole truth. Now, of course, you're not going to lie on your college application. I hope you're not. Please don't do that, because if you do and they find out, you're absolutely not going to get admitted. But when I say tell the whole truth, I mean that it can be tempting to overstate things that you've done. For example, if you list that you were an assistant coach for the JV boys soccer team at your high school, but really what you did is you went to 2 practices and helped out, and that's all you really did. Well, you could list that you offered occasional help at JV soccer practices under the guidance of the head coach. But if you say that you're an assistant coach, you're overstating it just a little bit. Now, sometimes people will follow up and ask, well, how could a college ever know that you were lying? And my question back is it worth taking the risk? Do you really want to take that risk? And I would say it's just not worth it, because if they find out you lied about one little thing like that, even though it wasn't a blatant lie, it just was an overstatement, well, then they have to question, well, what else are you not being truthful about in this application? So tell the whole truth, be proud of what you've done, whatever it is that you've done in high school, and share it as clearly and proudly as you can on the application. So going into a little bit more detail about a few of these elements here, the art of application presentation really begins with activities. Now, I want to talk about how colleges evaluate activities, but first I want to define activities. I have heard more than one student say something like, well, I don't really have any activities. I don't really do anything outside of school. And when we would follow up and ask, well, so what do you do when you get out of school every day? They say things like, well, I go work at my part-time job. Well, that's an activity. A part-time job is an activity. If you say, after school, I commute for an hour and a half to get home because I have to take 2 subways and a bus to get to and from school every day, that counts as an activity. If both of your parents work and you have a younger sister at home that's 8 years old and she walks home after school, and then you go home and take care of her every day after school until your parents get home, that counts as an activity. So don't dismiss any formal commitments that you have or informal commitments just because they might not sound like traditional activities. So sure, activities can be clubs, they can be sports, they can be community service, they can be leadership, but they can also be family responsibilities or commuting or part-time jobs. Anything you're doing that you're committing to and spending your time outside of class, colleges want to know about when these human beings are trying to evaluate the human being who's applying. So how do they evaluate activities? Well, first, it's sort of it's a myth that many people believe some activities inherently look better to colleges than others. Colleges don't have a magic list of these are the activities we like and these activities over here, they don't look so impressive to us. That any activity can be impressive to a college. What the college is actually evaluating is the quality and depth of commitment a student has made to this activity. Now, what does that actually mean? Well, if you say that you were in a particular club for a year, and it was in your sophomore year of high school, and you went to the meetings, but you never really did much with the club never produced anything, and you never went back after your sophomore year. I'm not saying you shouldn't list it on your application, but hopefully maybe you found some other activities where you were a little bit more committed. So, if it's something that you didn't do for that long or didn't care that much about, it's probably not something that a college will pay much attention to. In fact, we have a former admissions officer from Stanford that works for us that the way she phrased it was about activities. If you don't care about it, there's no way an admissions officer is going to care about it. So generally, the things that students care about are the things you've dedicated the most time to, that you've put the most energy into. And so rather than just the title of the activity itself being impressive or unimpressive, what a college is really trying to gauge is, well, how much did you commit to this? What sort of impact did you make? And with regards to impact, accomplishments plus contributions equal your impact. Impact is a way of sort of showing that this activity, whatever it is, was fundamentally better because you were there. Now, sometimes it's because you're just so good at this that you make your impact that way. Maybe it's you're the lead in the school play. You're not just in the school play. You're the first chair violinist in the orchestra. You're not just in the orchestra. You're the team captain and the leading scorer on the soccer team. You're not just on the soccer team. But those are accomplishments. Contributions can be equally valuable. We worked with a student who was on the cross-country team for 4 years, but one of her college essays, she talked about how she was the slowest runner on her high school cross-country team. But she stayed on that team and did all the work, and because the team meant so much to her, even though she just didn't get the genetic gift to let her be faster. And she talked about in her essay all the different ways that she made contributions to this team. She would host the dinners the night before the big cross-country meets when she would cook pasta for everybody, and she learned how to make different kinds of pasta. And during the summers when they wanted to do summer workouts as a team, she organized the workouts and figured out when they were going to go and where they were going to go and how far they were going to run. And so she found all these ways to make an impact. And so for an admissions officer, if I'm reading that application, I mean, now this person who was the slowest runner on their team, I'm probably not thinking, let's get her on our college cross country team. But what I am thinking is, this is a student who makes things better. When she joins something that she cares about, she makes things better. When we put her in a dorm, when we put her in a college activity, when we put her in a college class, this is the kind of person who makes an impact, who makes things better. And so that's what you want to think about when you think about presenting your activities to colleges. And then finally, activities are your chance to demonstrate your personal qualities. And that could be responsibility, that you're the person who said, we need to do a fundraiser to get new uniforms for the baseball team. I will be in charge of the fundraiser and you take responsibility. Or maybe you have the initiative to start a club or an organization that goes on to do some pretty impressive things and really makes a difference at your school. Or you could hold a leadership position and fundamentally improve the club or the organization. But so these are all the things that colleges are trying to evaluate when they look at your activities. And so when you go to list them on your application, a couple things to think about. First, list your most significant and impactful activities first. I still remember this, and it's more than 22 years later, but I remember one of our Collegewise students brought a first draft of an application in, and we review the applications with them to make sure that everything's perfect. And we thought we had discussed this with him before, but the very first thing he listed for his activities was ping pong club, 9th grade. This was something he'd done in 9th grade and never gone back to again. And so we course corrected with him and said, hey, let's move that to the bottom. And if we run out of space, let's move that off entirely. List your most significant and impactful activities first, because remember, these are human beings. They're trying to retain as much information as they can, but you don't want to bury the thing you cared most about in the middle of a list of 10 or 12 activities. So lead with your strongest stuff, the activities that meant the most to you. The way I usually describe it to students is, if you could only list one activity on your college application, which activity would you list? Whatever your answer is, that's the one that you list first. And then just continue from there. If you could only list 2, what would the second one be? If you could only list 3, what would the third one be? And when you run out of space, if you run out of space, don't worry. You've already shared the most important activities. And if you say, well, I also did, 13, 14, 15 other things that I could share here, ultimately they were not as impactful for you, and they won't be as impactful for your application. So lead with your most significant and impactful activities first. Second, highlight your accomplishments, contributions, and impact. So I talked about what those things are. Many applications will give you space to describe what an activity was. Sometimes they know what it was. I mean, if you say that, you played on the basketball team, varsity, for 2 years, they know what varsity basketball is, but they might not know that you were the captain. They might not know that you led the league in scoring. They might not know that you were first team all league. They might not know those things. So highlight accomplishments, contributions, and impact, the things that you were proud of, the things you contributed that really made a difference for everybody there. And this is how you use that space in a smart way, as opposed to, remember I said clarity over quantity, as opposed to trying to cram in 20 activities into that space. Maybe you're only highlighting 6 or 7 activities, but you're using that space to describe each of those and to describe how each of them was fundamentally improved because you were in it and what you did as a result of being there. And remember that activities can include any commitments you honor outside of class. I'm going to tell you a little secret here. Colleges really appreciate students who honor commitments, students who say things like, I've had a part-time job all throughout high school because I contribute money to my family finances. Or the example I used earlier, I take care of my little sister after school. Or I had a student once that wrote an essay about how it was her job and her family to do the family grocery shopping every week. And she would take her younger brother and sister with her, and she would cut coupons ahead of time. They made it a whole thing they would do. And she combined it with her responsibility for taking care of them after school. So if I'm an admissions officer and I see, well, she didn't have a lot of formal activities at her school, but since she was 16 when she was able to drive, since then, she's been responsible for taking care of her younger brother and sister. She does the weekly grocery shopping for the family. She cuts out coupons to save money for them. She finds a way to get all the stuff that everybody needs, and she's also starting to contribute to the cooking in her household. This is a student who is a decent, responsible, good person, and we need people like that on our campuses. So please, I'm going to use a strong word here, but I've seen this from students. I've seen some students that because of their family responsibilities or their family circumstances, they haven't been able to participate in traditional activities, and they're almost ashamed of it. Don't be ashamed of it. If you have contributed to your family, if you've helped your family, if you've commuted an hour and a half to and from school every day, be proud of what you have done to get to this point where you are applying to college. And I promise colleges will be impressed when you share that with them. Because those are your circumstances and everybody is different. And they want to know, that's why they're giving you this space so you can share this kind of information. Okay, now let's talk a little bit about essays. There are really two different kinds of essays that you'll see in college applications, and not all schools use both of them. But the first is generally referred to as the personal statement essay, and it might look something like this. I am so sorry. Okay. Now, in addition to this, and you can see this really gives you sort of a broad spectrum of topics you can pick from. Some colleges, and they will usually do it in addition to a personal statement, will have one or more specific essays that you write. I'll give you a few examples here, and these are school specific. I'm just going to give you a few samples here. One more. Oops, sorry. I thought I had one more, but I'll give you an example of one more. One of the ones that I've seen frequently is, tell us about a time you failed or made a mistake and what you learned from it, which I really love that question, because anybody who's successful in life has ultimately made mistakes. They've ultimately failed. High school is the only time when students feel all this pressure to be perfect. And so the student who says things like, you know, I tried out for the school play and I didn't make it. And so I volunteered to run the lights for the production because I just wanted to be involved. And, you know, that's a really interesting thing to learn about a student and somebody who's going to be able to bounce back from something that, I mean, I don't think it's a failure not to make the school play, but if you really wanted to and you don't get picked, it might feel like a failure. And when you say, but I decided to find a way to stay involved anyway, that's an example of the kind of thing they'd want to know about you. So why are they asking you to write essays? It is not a writing test. If they wanted to know what kind of writer you were, they could ask you to submit a graded paper from like your English class. But what they do is they're trying to get to know the student beyond the academics. One of our former admissions officers who now works for us described it this way. He said, you know, when I would read essays as an admissions officer, I would be thinking to myself, would I want this student to be my roommate if I were back in college? You are more than your grades, your test scores, and your activities. You are a real person with a history, with a family, with interests, with character, with stories to tell. And colleges use essays as an opportunity to hear some of those things about you. They can never learn everything about you. You're too complex to share everything about yourself in a college application. But this is their way of saying, we want to know who you are as a person before we make this decision, because we're not just admitting a list of qualifications to our school. We're admitting a real human being who's presumably going to come live here on campus and interact with people. So we're trying to get a sense of who you are. And they really want to get to know the student beyond the academics. And this is where they can learn more about your personal qualities. And personal qualities can be things like responsibility, maturity, your work ethic, how you approach challenges in life, things that you've faced, anything that's part of your story. These are things that they're trying to learn about during the application process. And the essays are really the best place for them to learn those things. And in some cases, the particular questions might come right out and ask you, tell us why you're applying to our college. And those can be a great time for students to share. Excuse me, I thought I turned every notification off that was ever possible to turn off on this computer before I started this, but now I'm not able to do it somehow for some reason. So let's see here. To discover if the student is the right fit for the college, Colleges will ask some questions that will give them a sense of, have you really looked into what we have to offer here? Because they're going to extend offers of admissions to students, but not everybody is going to say yes to those offers. Some of those students are going to go someplace else. So ultimately, colleges want to offer those admissions to people that they think have a good chance of actually accepting that offer. So if they ask you a question like, tell us what first inspired you to apply to our school, and you don't really have a compelling answer for that, it sort of shows them that maybe you don't really have a good reason why you're applying there, and they have to wonder if you're actually interested. The most important tips I can give you for college essays, in fact, really, if you only followed one of these, this would take you a long way. Don't try to guess what admissions officers want to hear. Just tell the truth. And what most students do, and I understand why you do this, because there's a lot of pressure when you're applying to college. You want to present as well as possible. They try to guess what the admissions office wants to hear. They say to themselves, what's going to sound good? And it's almost like they put themselves on a stage with a spotlight on them, and they're trying to come up with something impressive. But that's what everybody else is doing. And then everybody ends up saying the same thing. And so they end up reading, admissions officers end up reading hundreds of essays that say things like, playing 2 years of high school varsity football taught me many important lessons about hard work and commitment. Now, that might actually be a true statement. You might have done that. You might have learned hard work and commitment, but you've never said those words to someone else, I'm guessing. And so really try to think about, what is my honest answer to this question? If I wasn't trying to be performative, what would my answer be? And then try to share what the reader does not already know from your application. So let's say you were on the high school debate team. If you write a 500-word essay describing what it was like to be on the high school debate team, well, they knew that already. They knew you were on there. But maybe you want to share something that isn't mentioned anywhere on your application, or maybe you want to share something new that they wouldn't know about something that already is mentioned. Like that runner who I told you who was the slowest runner on the cross-country team. They knew from her application she'd run 4 years of cross-country, but they didn't know that she was the slowest runner on the team and that she found all these other ways to contribute. That's what they learned from her essay. So it's okay to write about something that is listed on the application, but if you're going to do that, make sure you're revealing new information about that particular topic. And then finally, ask someone that you trust for feedback, like your English teacher or your school counselor. It's generally a good idea to go to someone who knows a little something about college essays, because this is a very different piece of writing. It's not the same kind of writing that you do in your high school English classes. Your English teachers are teaching you the right things, because when you write academic papers in college, they're going to expect you to write them like you're learning in your English classes. But college essays are about you. You're the topic. So even what your English teachers tell you about don't use the word I in an essay, it's good advice for an academic essay. It would never work for a college essay because you're writing about yourself. So this is a personal narrative that you're sharing. So we find that school counselors and English teachers give very good advice around college essays, especially because they know you and they know your story and they know where you're applying, and they can give you some really good advice. You might not be able to follow this if you've started your essays already, but I'll give you one other bonus tip here. Ask for advice about your story before you write the essay. Go to that person and say, here's what I'm thinking about writing. Here's what I'm planning to do. What do you think about it? Because if they say, actually, I think that's a mistake. I think you should think about doing something else. Well, you haven't written it yet. It's a lot more demoralizing to spend a lot of time doing something and then you bring it to someone who feels like maybe, and I'm not projecting failure onto you here, but people can give you much more direct and often helpful advice if you're seeking it before you've actually written the essays. Get on the right track before you even start, and then maybe they'll have time for you to come back to them when you've written it to give it kind of, give some final comments. All right, so remember, every student has an equal chance to write strong college essays. This is not a writing test. Don't take yourself out of the game by saying, well, I'm not an AP English, I'm not a good writer, I'm better at math and science. It's not a writing test. It's a chance for you to talk about yourself in an essay and help an admissions officer get to know you, which is really the whole point in the first place. I'm going to take a sip of my water here. 1 second. I apologize. I'm just getting over a cold, and I'm back at full strength now, but I still got the cold remnants with me, so apologies for my coughing here. Now, not all colleges require letters of recommendation, but those that do are usually very specific about who they want you to go to for letters of recommendation, and how many letters are required. So I'm going to go back to that first piece of advice. Follow instructions. Don't decide that you have a better way. Now, usually what they will do is they will say, colleges will say that they want one letter from a counselor, from your school counselor, and one letter from your teacher. Right? And you can pick any teacher that you want to. I'm going to give you a few pieces of advice about that. Some students get concerned about going to a school counselor for a letter of recommendation. They say things like, my school counselor doesn't really know me. I'm at a big high school. There's 600 students in my class. Like the school counselor doesn't know me at all. How can she possibly write a letter of rec? You shouldn't worry about that. First of all, colleges have very reasonable expectations about what school counselors are able to do. There are some school counselors at smaller private high schools that can write really, rich, detailed letters for students, and those are wonderful for the counselors that are able to do it. But if you're at a larger public school, the admissions officers take time to get to know the individual high schools. In fact, in most cases, they are reading for specific geographic regions of the country. So they'll understand that that's not something that's going to happen from your school. And really what they want from a school counselor is it's almost like verifying the information that you've shared and helping to put it in context. So when I say that, here's an example. They might say something like, our school offers 6 AP classes, and this student has successfully completed 4 of them. Well, that little piece of information there tells them a lot about how much you've challenged yourself in high school, and your school counselor is the source of truth there. They're the ones that can really show them sort of your context within the school. But the teacher letters of recommendation, right, here we have the context of the school, the teacher letters of recommendation are more to tell the colleges about the one thing that only that teacher can tell them. And it's not what grade did you get in the course, because remember, college has your transcript already. The teacher can tell them, what are you like when you are in that class? For example, are you someone who seems genuinely interested in what the teacher is teaching? Do you ask thoughtful questions? Do you contribute to class discussion? Did you struggle in this class and you came in every day after school to get help and finally raised your grade from a D to a B? There can be all sorts of academic stories about you that will never be known from just looking at your grade. And that is really what colleges are seeking when they ask for letters of recommendation. It's also why most colleges that ask for teacher letters of recommendation are smaller private colleges, where you're not necessarily going to spend time in college in 500-person lecture halls. You're going to be in smaller classes with discussion, where you're interacting with the professor and other students. And so they're trying to get a sense of your ability to do that as a high school student. And your teachers are really the only people who can speak to those things. And so when we recommend, when we speak with our Collegewise students about who they should go to for letters of rec, the first thing we ask them is not, what class did you do the best in? Whatever class you got the highest grade in, the college is going to know that already from the transcript. So we say, who is the teacher who could really tell your academic story? Who could really speak to the best version of you in a class? Who can do that? It's not necessarily a teacher who knows you well either. Sometimes students will say, well, my pre-calculus teacher is also the advisor for our student government, so she knows me really well. That can be helpful, but it is not as important as what she can say about the person you are in class. So when I say academic story in this first pro tip, it means who can tell the most compelling story about you in class as a student? Are you engaged? Are you interactive? Are you thoughtful? Are you somebody who seems like you really want to learn this material? And wherever you demonstrate that, that's the teacher that you want to go to for your letter of recommendation. If possible, and it's not always possible, but if possible, select a teacher from your junior year. The reason I say that is your junior year is the most recent year of academic information that a college can get about you. So if you say, I don't really have any teachers from my junior year that can tell my academic story, but I've got a great one from my sophomore year, then go to the great one from your sophomore year. But if possible, the junior year is preferable. And then finally, unless otherwise instructed, select teachers from core academic subjects. This does come back to my original advice, though, about follow instructions. And colleges will often be clear about, like for example, if you're applying as an engineering major, a college might specify that they want a letter of recommendation from a math or science teacher. So When in doubt, follow the instructions that the college has given you. But if they don't make stipulations about who to go to, then we recommend that you go to someone in a core topic. The one time we might change that is if you were applying, say, as an art or a music major and you wanted to go to one of the teachers who taught you in that subject. I think that would be perfectly appropriate unless the instructions said otherwise. All right, this is our last section, and we'll spend the least time here because the interviews, here's the punchline, are the least important part of the college admissions process. I have never heard of a student being rejected from a college because they had a bad interview. So that doesn't mean don't try hard. It doesn't mean don't take them seriously, but it does mean they generally aren't things you should worry about. Typically, they are only offered by private colleges. There are two kinds of interviews, informative and evaluative. Informative interviews are done on college campuses, and not all colleges do this, but some of them say if you come to tour our campus and you'd like to set up, and here's the word, informational interview, feel free to do that. Many students don't know that that doesn't mean that the college is going to be evaluating you for admission. Well, all it means is that they're going to be answering any questions you have about the college. Evaluative interviews, on the other hand, are part of the application process. When in doubt, you can always ask, is this interview informative or evaluative? And they'll answer your question. It's not a rude question to ask. The evaluative interviews are the ones that we care about here because they're part of the application process. And generally what colleges do is they recruit alumni, graduates of the college from across the country who want to stay involved in some way to interview applicants that live in their city. And so if you have, I'm so sorry, I have everything turned off and I don't know how to get this to stop beeping at me. I'm just going to forge ahead here. So usually when you do an evaluative interview, it will be with a graduate of the college. And that graduate is not employed by the college. They aren't a member of the admissions committee, but they will be taking notes on what you say and they'll be sharing it with the admissions committee. And so it is always the least important part of the process because it's secondhand information. It's secondhand information from someone who's met you. And so it can carry a little bit of weight, but generally interviews only serve to confirm or deny what an admissions office has already decided about you. So the most important things I can share in terms of tips here are that it's a conversation. This is not a job interview. That a successful college interview really just means you sit down and show that you are comfortable having an engaging, mature conversation with an adult. And when you can do that, then you've won. That's the college interview, if you can do that. And so once students know that ahead of time, they tend to show up a lot less nervous than they otherwise might be. So just remember, the interviewer has very little power. They can certainly help you. They can do almost nothing to hurt you. So show up, be eager, look forward to having this conversation. And remember, conversation is a two-way street, that it's okay for you to ask questions of them as well. Relax and be yourself. And remember, this is an opportunity for you to ask questions of someone who attended this school. And so students that have successful college interviews are generally those that show up, they smile, they look like they're happy to be there, they answer questions, they ask questions, and the conversation flows and it just kind of flows. The conversation moves quickly. And before you know it, the interview's over and you both really enjoyed speaking with each other. It's not a job interview where you're being asked questions where there are right and wrong answers to those questions. It's not a test. They're not testing you. It really is just a conversation. Okay. So with the time we've got left, I want to tell you just a little bit more about Collegewise and give you a chance to learn more about us. And then I'll answer a few questions that you might have put up here. So, I've talked a lot about our Collegewise counselors as we've been doing this. And so right now, all of our counselors are working with their seniors at Collegewise to, depending on where those students are in the process, to do things like finalize their college lists, make sure that they have a balanced list of schools they're applying to. We deal with the application project management of sort of deciding what do you need to do first? What should you be doing second? What are the different elements that you need to bring together here for your applications? We're not doing the work for our students, but we are like the guides. I kind of liken it to the way that adults teach a teenager to drive. You don't jump into the driver's seat and drive for them, but you're in the passenger seat, making sure that they don't make any mistakes along the way. That's what we do with our seniors who are applying to college. And so we help them with everything from presenting themselves in the activity section. We brainstorm college essays with them and make sure they're writing on compelling topics. We have editors who review those drafts of students and come back with suggestions so the students are presenting their best selves in those essays. And really, our job is to make sure that everything progresses smoothly and thoughtfully with the students that we're working with. And so really, I think that the benefit that families get from doing this with us, and not everybody needs a college counselor to help them apply to college, but many people just find peace of mind knowing that someone who does this for a living is watching over this, making sure that everything goes exactly as it should. We can't guarantee that you'll get into the colleges of your dreams because you work with us, but I can promise you that if you work with a Collegewise counselor to apply to college, together we will do it well, we will do it right, and you will not make a mistake because we just won't permit it. That's our job. That's what we do. And so with that, we're going to put up one more poll here to see if you would like to learn anything about Collegewise. And while you're filling out the poll, my colleague Belinda can come off mic and see if there's any questions that we should be taking here.
Hello, can you hear me this time?
Yes, you're loud and clear now.
Yay. Well, hi everybody. I'm Belinda. I'm the Director of Partnerships here at Collegewise. So I work with lots of organizations like the ACT and schools across the country to help bring what Collegewise does to schools and school counselors, as well as the individual work that Kevin and our team do with our families. Okay, so we're going to give you a little bit more time for the poll. We've had only some of you answer so far. If you are thinking you might like to talk with somebody at Collegewise to learn more about potentially working with us, then definitely select A. If you're not sure yet, but you would like some more information, then we will send you some more information. That will be selecting B. C, if you are really just here for the free resources, that is absolutely fine by us. We love sharing free resources at Collegewise. We invest a lot of time in creating those, and we want to make sure you can get hold of as much free information as possible. And finally, D, if you're a counselor or an educator and you would like to learn more about the work that Collegewise does with schools, we are always very happy to help. All right, so let's move on from that. And then you can see this final slide here. There's a couple of QR codes there that you can scan if you're interested to learn more. Okay, so we do have some great questions in the Q&A box for you, Kevin, of course.
Let's hear it.
So the first question is, oh, hang on, it's all moving around. Okay, so does it matter if you're not sure about what major, but you have an idea? Is it better to put undecided or pick one?
Good. So if you are applying to a college that offers undecided as an option, it is always okay to apply undecided as an option. I know of no college that offers it as an option and then secretly judges applicants negatively who apply under that major. I also know of many colleges that don't offer undecided as an option. And if you were to go to a college interview and answer a question, have you given any thought to what you might want to major in? And you answer that like, no, I really haven't given that much thought yet. Well, that shows that you're probably applying to the wrong college. So it could be a bad idea to indicate that you want to do that if it is a college that doesn't offer that option. But as long as the option is offered, totally okay to do.
Okay, so somebody else is asking about advice for homeschool students. They've been homeschooled for most of their life and have taken 1 or 2 classes at high school. What can they do to approach the process successfully?
That's a pretty big question. So especially given that you're here now in the actual application process, I think it's an important question. I would suggest that the student contact the college and ask, and in particular about the elements of the application. So I don't know if this is the one we're looking at, but I saw one earlier that was asking about letters of recommendation if you're a homeschooled student. I think it's perfectly appropriate for a student to contact a college and say, I am a homeschooled student who's genuinely interested in applying to your school. And I just have a few specific questions, and really figure out what are the most important things that you need to know. Now, if you do that, I think you'll get the most important information. My best advice for you would be to make sure that you maximize the opportunities in those essays to help them get to know you. And I would use, if it's appropriate with one of the topics that they give you, I would use one of those topics to discuss your homeschooling education and to share with them, why did your family make that choice? How has that gone for you? And has it been beneficial for you? Have there been challenges? And if there's challenges, that's perfectly okay. Everything comes with some challenges. Nothing is perfect, including college, by the way, okay? So totally okay to do that. And then it really gives you a chance to share, why are you excited to go to a non-homeschooling environment in college to pursue your college education? So they'll want to hear from you in those essays. And if one of those topics gives you the opportunity to touch on your homeschooling experience, I would recommend that you do it. We have time for one more, Belinda. Do you want to do one more?
Kevin, this is Allie. Belinda's having some technical difficulties again. So if you want to go through the Q&A and pick one that you like, that'd be awesome.
Sure. I'll do a couple rapid fire. So I see someone just asked, some colleges recommend submitting a video. Any thoughts on what should be included in the video? Don't feel that you have to make a big production, literally, with the video. Use it as an opportunity to share something about yourself that you would like the college to know about you, and make it as natural and in your normal personality as possible. It should be something that is not listed in your application, something that just gives them a glimpse into who you are. And remember that you'll never be able to share everything about yourself. So pick, I always say, your life is a slice of bread. Pick one little slice to share in that video. Let's do two more that are rapid fire. I'll pick a few more. I saw one earlier that was, is it better to take AP biology and get a B, or take the regular biology and get an A? The answer is, it's better to take the more difficult class and get a B. Colleges want to see that you're challenging yourself. The asterisk I would give to that is, colleges would prefer that you not take the more difficult course and get a C, because then they don't know what your real ability is then. So we generally advise to our students, if you know that you're strong in a subject and you have an opportunity to take an AP or honors class, it's a good idea to do that, even if it means you don't get an A. If you struggle with the subject and you're given that same opportunity, you might think twice about it. But with your best subjects, your strongest subjects, the ones you're most comfortable with, always take the most challenging course that's available to you. And then I'll take one more here, and then we'll let everybody go home. Let's see. What if you don't have any leadership roles in clubs, but you did stuff? That's an important question. Leadership in college admissions does not necessarily require that you hold an office. Leadership means that you saw a change that needed to be made, and you raised your hand and said, I will take responsibility for doing this. So even our cross-country runner I shared, who organized the workouts over the summer, she wasn't team captain, but that was leadership, because she raised her hand, she took the initiative, she took responsibility, and made this happen for everyone else. So don't get leadership. People always ask, isn't leadership important for college admissions? And usually what they mean is, don't I need to have leadership positions? You don't need to have leadership positions, but leadership is one of many kinds of impact you can make in the things that you do. And it doesn't necessarily require that you have an office. In fact, you've probably been, maybe some of you have experienced some clubs or organizations where the people who are in leadership positions might not really be doing that much of anything. But sometimes somebody in that club who may or may not have an office is doing a lot to impact the club. That's the person that you want to be. And if you do that, that's what colleges want to know about. So with that, I want to say thank you to everyone. And then to our partners from ACT, do you have anything you want to say before we close out here?
Yes. Thank you so much to Collegewise and our incredible presenter, Kevin, tonight. I know these insights are so valuable, and it's really helping these seniors in what can be such an overwhelming time. One last thing before we say goodbye. When our webinar ends, you're going to see a survey pop up, and we'd appreciate it if you could take 5 minutes to answer those questions so that we know how to best support you in the future. Belinda and I are in the process of planning our webinars for 2026. So if you have any suggestions for topics or webinars or things that you need support on, we would love to hear those. Thank you so much. And on behalf of ACT and Collegewise, thank you for joining us.
Thanks, everyone.